Hello, students. Rick Oling here to talk to you about Linda Pastan's poem on the steps of the Jefferson Memorial. And this would be to help people do revisions. These papers were already in very good shape in terms of getting the basic meaning of the poem. Like I can remember countless poems where I thought, yeah, you get it. And I actually learned a lot from your papers about what you saw going on in the poem. It changed how I saw the poem. So it's all very good. Let me offer what I think was the most consistent, I would say, underreading of a key image, and try by offering a slightly different take on it to maybe allow you guys to return to the poem one more time for revisions and maybe make it even a little bit more self-consistent. Here's the deal. The Greek gods seen as sort of arbitrary and human and not very just. Athena and Poseidon, are fighting. And that doesn't seem very godlike. That seems, more like how people behave, mortals. And Athena and Poseidon are siblings. And they do take opposite sides in the most famous war, the Trojan War. Poseidon sides with the Trojans, Athena sides with the Greeks. So the first part of the poem was about how the Greek gods are very arbitrary. You guys said that makes them flawed, yes, especially with Zeus and the rape of Leda. But the flaw also links to them behaving like mortals, and that's a really important point to hold on to for the second part of the poem. Okay, because they're very mortal in their behavior, brother and sister squabbling. Don't get too hung up about that and the idea that these are deities, because actually the Greeks were completely comfortable with the idea that their gods were not just or fair or all knowing or all merciful, certainly not. Uh, their gods all had these curious human limitations. All right, how to link that to the second part? When you guys went to the second part of the poem and you said, oh, look at this monument, Jefferson Memorial. At first, the impression is of godlike being, larger than us, perfect, flawless. The architectural style suggests completeness. We maintain the Jefferson Memorial in great shape, so it's not in ruins, right? But then you guys said, oh, but look at the veins in the marble. That suggests flaws. As if the whole thing was going to crumble and fall apart. as if the veins were cracks. Veins aren't cracks. The veins are just how marble is. Let me offer you guys this type. A lot of you said, oh, Jefferson can't be believed anymore. He was a hypocrite because he not only owned a slave, but he was really, in some ways, so intimately connected to her. And yet, they live this contradiction of slave and master. Let's not get into too much of that particular. She's really moves through this fast, doesn't she? She's got her key image. The marble is veined. That means he's human. Now we can actually say, oh, good. This need to put them on pedestals. In some ways, the Greeks didn't do that. They didn't make the figures, their gods, flawless. Um, we can do that with the men and women who we admire from the past. There are very few people from the past who, if we were to go through all their writings and letters and speeches and statements and beliefs, we wouldn't find ourselves conflicting with them. You know, in the distant past, many of them felt the earth was flat. That really makes sense to go back and rebuke them as if saying, oh, you were completely wrong. You got everything wrong. That's not what Baston's trying to say, is it? She's offering, I think, quite the opposite, which is, yeah, Vane's the marble. That makes him like us, which means that maybe we should even attend upon his words and his legacy even more closely because he knows his weaknesses. Um, I think in some way, we always like to think of democracy in a wholly positive light as a thing that grants everyone equal opportunity to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. But I do think, especially in scary times like this, democracy's almost more essential role is to disable the tyrants, those who would have power over others, especially not just like one person in the throne or in the White House, but the way that it seems that different, even in democracies, different parts of the community do try to control and govern others. And I think that's where Jefferson and the other founding fathers made so much progress by being aware of man's desire to take power away from the king, perhaps, but then uh, keep that power among an elite. So Jefferson's words are what oftentimes allows us to grant power to everyone over time, even ones people who he would have been startled to discover in his time and with the belief systems of his time that women would not only get the opportunity to vote, but to go to the University of Virginia, which he designed, to be able to go to the College of William and Mary, where he and I both went around the same time in the 1700s. Do you see what I'm saying here? That I think we can say, oh, wow, Jefferson would not have foreseen that much equality for everyone. And some people these days are arguing that's right. He was right to not foresee that much equality for them. But we know otherwise. We know the reason that any of us enjoys our rights in this country is because such great lengths were gone to think through the logic of democracy. So I think that's what the poem is really about. It's about how, wow, human beings who have been enslaved so long to a different way of thinking were able to create and work out in detail how this new form of thinking democracy might work. So I think it's a very inspiring poem. A lot of your papers seem to get kind of like, oh, the gods have fallen, there's only ruins all around us. Uh, we shouldn't believe in Jefferson's words or ideas because he was this hypocrite. We have way too much of this going on these days, don't we? Just banishing someone because we, in looking back, you know, hindsight is 2020. We can see contradictions in their character. Linda Pastan would say, "We're just seeing veins in the portrait. We're still realizing that they're very human." All right, I would, with this one, create a careful outline. It's the key. It's the transition from part one to part two is going to be hard to write, but that's why you want to think as clearly as you can. And I think you're like, oh, actually, the poem, if I stick to what the poem says, it makes sense. And don't be too catastrophic about bringing President Jefferson down. As we all know, he was a great man. And probably annoying as anything to live with. But hey, he was also a great inventor. We'll talk about that. I think living in his household would have been fascinating because he invented all these things for the household, even that were new and quite wondrous.